Hey guys, it's Lindy.
And it's Mike here, and this is TIY.
The Tiny It Yourself channel where we show you how to do DIY projects for your tiny house.
And today we are going to do our metal siding.
Yep, so we have our galvanized mini rib, and we got this idea from the Sasquatch tiny houses, which they'll be linked down below.
So this is it from the side. You can see it's about 3/8 of an inch thick, and we got this from a company called McElroy Metal. It's super light, and of course we need to keep a really light tiny house.
We like the look because we thought it paired well having an industrial with like a rustic cedar edge.
So in this video we're going to talk a little bit about preparation, what you need to do in terms of what trims need to go where, and then we're going to show you how to cut it and install it and all that good stuff, so let's go.
Alright, the first thing we're going to talk about is our trims. This right here is our base trim. It's the first thing we did before putting up any of our siding. It's traditionally used as a structural component, but in our case it's more to have an aesthetic finished look. It also acts as like a mini gutter to keep the water away from the base of our trailer. The second trim we use is this J trim. It goes basically everywhere that the base trim is not, around your windows, like so, on the tops and on the edges. Our J trim is 7/8 of an inch wide. That way it fits nicely over the metal ribbing. They do make specific metal edge trim, but we decided to keep emphasizing the cedar like we have on our windows and in the middle here. So basically we'll be doing the edges like so. And in order to get this piece to lay flat, as you can see here, we hammered down the last edge of this with a rubber mallet. Otherwise we would have this rib sticking out. Now we're gonna show you how Mike installed the base trim.
Okay, so if you saw our cedar siding video, you already know that we used the J trim to vertically separate the cedar and the metal, and that gives us a nice clean edge. You won't be able to see the cut at all, and then this will be caulked up so that no water gets in the crack. And then as you can see on this wall that we already finished, we also use the J trim on the top to separate it from that cedar roof trim, and then it gives it a nice finish as well. And then finally, here's an example of how it looks around a window. So let's go and install some of this around one that hasn't been done. Okay, so here's the wall that we're gonna go ahead and do first. We already have that J trim on the left again, but we still need to do the J trim around the windows and on the top. So let's go. All right, here's the window we're gonna do, and it's kind of important to note that the configuration of the J trim mirrors the configuration of the cedar trim in the sense that the top one is longer, it overhangs the side trims, and then the side ones only overhang the bottom trim, and the bottom trim won't overhang any. So the bottom J trim is gonna be the same exact width as the outside of the cedar trim. Okay, these are all the tools that I use for my trim cutting. I have my shears, my square, my tape measure, and a pen I like to use if you have a pen that can mark on metal because it gives you a really crisp line, really precise, otherwise a Sharpie. And then I like to have at least one glove for the hand that I'm holding the metal with. And then in terms of actually anchoring them, of course I have a drill with a Phillips head and these screws that the company gave me with the trim. They are a number 10-16 1-inch pancake self-drilling screw. And in case I'm high up on a ladder or something and self-drilling is sketchy, I will pre-drill the hole. Okay, so I like to do all my marks on the back side so that you don't end up with any marks on your finish side. And so once I have the measurement, I just go ahead and propagate that out with this square. Again, super precise line with the pen. And then I actually just eyeball this cut and try to make it as square as possible, otherwise I have to do a line. Okay, so here's the piece I just cut. As you can see, it fits, and I just pre-drilled those holes to be absolutely sure this one was gonna work. And then I try to get as much pressure as I can up against the side so that I don't get it screwed in at an angle. And the other one. That easy. And again, the bottom metal piece ends at the wood trim. I've seen some people extend it and do some complicated sort of interlocking things, but I feel fine just doing this. So that corner looks like that, but then this corner, it ends right there and the top one will go over it. All right, now that this window is done, it's time to do the J trim on the wheel well trim. Okay, so the first piece that I have is this one that's actually gonna slide behind this piece, but the idea is that it's going to completely cover the top of the trim so that as water comes down, it's gonna slide off this way. Then I have a little flap here that's actually gonna go over the next piece, and that way the water will just run down that way. All right, it's really windy, so I might have to overdub this, but this just slides up under that and right there. And now I just need to screw it in and it's done. All right, there it is. And this really is annoying because it's perfect and now it's not. And it's perfect and now it's not. Hopefully the siding will push it down into place. Okay, so here's the long piece of J trim that's gonna go up against the roof trim on the top. And I went ahead and I marked where I hope the studs are, because we have 24-inch on center studs, but there's about a 5-degree incline, so it's a little more than 24 inches, so hopefully we'll hit those. All right, so I've notched that piece out, and the piece I'm about to put on will just puzzle piece in there and go all the way along that trim. Okay, so now that all of the J trim is on there, it's time to start doing the panels. And I think the best way to start is by sort of mapping out the wall that you're gonna do. And I did that here. It's gonna be difficult to see, but it's basically going to be 3 panels, and I've measured out the dimensions for the window so I can cut that out. And it's really as simple as just like cutting out cardboard or something in terms of the dimensions. You just have to make sure you have the outline correct. The main difference is that on the last mini rib, there is an overlap. It's a little over an inch. And that means you have to think about which one you want to overlap on which. And I definitely highly suggest making sure that you're thinking about the wind and which way you're gonna be going when you're driving. So I'm doing the farthest back piece first, and then I'm overlaying the next one on that, and overlaying the next one on that. And in terms of cutting them to the right shape, I am using a grinder with a metal cutoff blade that is 1/25 of an inch thick. And in terms of safety, you wanna have eye protection, face protection, ear protection is ideal, and covering yourself and making sure you don't have clothes that can melt from the sparks is also a good idea. And now some points about anchoring. You wanna make sure that you are anchoring on the lower rib and not the higher rib, otherwise it'll crush it and mess everything up. And you also wanna make sure that that anchoring is on a stud. And so sometimes you might intuitively think, oh, I'm just gonna butt this up against the end of the wall, but then your rib might not hit a stud down here, so you might have to actually cut the nice edge and move it over a little bit in order to match the screws up with the studs all the way down. And here's an example of that. I have a mark where the stud is, and if I just popped it in normally, this would be exactly in the wrong place. So if I just trim off, you know, to there or so, all of a sudden it's right in line with the stud. So I'm gonna have to trim off an entire strip along the whole piece of metal. And another solution is to simply flip it, and that way it can land in the same way. You just have to be lucky enough to have a panel that is the same on both sides. And these screws are number 12-14, 1¼ inch self-drilling screws. And they're a little bit shorter than ones you might get if you have wooden studs. And they do have a little gasket on so that they don't leak. All right, now for marking my cut, since it's a 36-inch panel, I like using my 48-inch level so I can get a line all the way across. And by the way, this was hit by a plow when it was under the snow, and thankfully I'm gonna be able to chop that corner off. But I just mark the peaks, so that way I have an accurate line. And now in terms of supporting it for the cut, I just like to make sure that I have a nice gap off the ground there so that my cutoff blade is not gonna hit the ground. And this is just an old piece of OSB sheathing. Really quick, I wanna mention, because my piece is over 10 feet long, I am cutting it on the ground. If it was shorter, I would probably clamp it to some tables, but since it's kind of windy and it's a sail, it's probably more dangerous to do it that way. So I'm doing it on the ground. Just have to make sure to not step on the ribs too hard, otherwise you can dent them. All right, so there's the cut, and it turned out really good, but just so you know, remember there's about an inch of J trim in front of it, so if it's not completely perfect, no one's gonna know. All right, now I've marked my window out and I'm ready to chop it out, and then this piece is done. All right, now for the most tedious part, which is hammering down that outside ridge so that I can put that cedar trim over it so that it's flat. And that just involves malleting it for a really long time. You can also flip it around like it is right now and get a better hit on this corner right here to flatten it out. But that's the end result. It's not super flat, but since we're gonna be screwing trim down directly on it, it'll sort of flatten it out and make it good enough. One thing I do before I put the panel on, in order for it to slide in, I do a little notch there. If anybody knows a way around this, that would be awesome, because this is just a really annoying thing to do. So I did one there, and I did one right there. And that way the piece will slide all the way in. Okay, now that the piece is on there, I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure it's precisely in place and then throw some anchor screws in. Okay, in case you're wondering about screw placement, these are about 9 inches apart. I basically just skipped 2 ribs between each screw. And because of our metal studs, we have a little bit of a weird configuration. So there's gonna be some horizontal that I'm gonna drill into as well. So it's not a standard screw placement situation. All right, so this next one is gonna be super hard because not only am I plopping it that way, I also have to get it under the trim on top, which is diagonally facing the wrong way. So I might have to bend some of that trim up, but for now I'm just gonna try and see what happens. You're gonna have to get on a roof with a hammer and sort of ease it in. Okay, to illustrate what I just tried that failed, since this was higher than that, I was trying to just take the back of a hammer and just bend that out far enough for this to slide under. But it's too tight under here, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unscrew the J channel up here where I can, and hopefully I can twist it out and slide it in at the same time. All right, here goes nothing. Ah, yes. Okay, so I'm back at it and I'm ready to put the third piece on here. And as you can see, it's got a little bit of a complicated situation happening down by the wheel well. And I just went ahead and cut some extra window flashing tape in half just to make sure that that seam was completely fine, because it was kind of curling out a little bit and I wanted the water, in case it gets behind, to run off. And then I just had some patches that I covered with some extra tape as well. But this one's gonna be really easy to throw in because I won't have to bend that top J channel or anything. And I simply measured that weird wheel well shape several times from a few angles to double check it, and then just marked it on here, and it's ready to cut. But the ultimate question is gonna be if I can get just enough pressure on here, get it exact enough so that it pops that right into place. We'll see. All right, will it fit? Moment of truth. All right, and guess what also happened? Yes! And another thing I want to mention really quick is to be sure to not over tighten these, because they can over compress the gasket there, which can make it fail. And I'll put a chart of the ideal situation down there. And in order to prevent that, I just have this Black & Decker drill set at about 8, and so that it'll fail with too much pressure. So I'll screw one in really quick just to show you. Okay, so I do have a couple more sides done, which were really easy and straightforward, but I figured I'd just tell you what I did on them really quickly. So this one, I of course started back there because the wind is going that way. I put the first piece in, which sort of notched a little bit into that window, so it didn't create any difficulties. And then I did the second one, which I slided from there, and then I just did one final little piece like that. And I did hammer it flat right there and right there, because trim is gonna go there as well. And this one wasn't too bad, but again, I started on that one, had a little notch out for that window, and then I actually did a piece like that and a piece like that, and then the final piece met right there, and it was a little difficult to get in. Just use the back end of the hammer to pry that J trim out a little bit as I slid it in. It was annoying, but not impossible. But on this next wall I'm doing, I wanted to show a little bit more detail because I have a major challenge right here with this first piece. I had to put the scaffolding there because I got to do some complicated stuff up really high. But basically, I have to get that first piece in, and of course that J trim is going there, that J trim is going there, that J trim is going there, and then we've got the J trim on the bottom there as well. So it's really difficult to get in, and so my plan is to leave that piece of J trim on right there, bow it so it snaps into those two, and then after the fact I'm going to slide these two pieces of J trim in, and sadly I'm going to have to just screw through it all. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and try and put this into position. We'll see what happens. Okay, so I'm exactly where I want to be. The challenge is going to be to arc this so that it fits behind that J channel right there. Let's see if we can do it. Little bit of truth. No problem at all. I did have to bend this piece down though, which I really didn't want to have to do. That part of the J trim. I'll have to just bend it back and hopefully take the kink out of it. Now I'm just going to slide the horizontal J trims on, and it will be done.
And here's our finished product. As you can see, we finished all the edges and our tongue box, which we'll have in our upcoming video.
All right, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like
And subscribe.
and see you next time.
Bye.